Welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to take a fascinating journey that completely rethinks the foundation of money, technology, and honestly, global human welfare. We're not just looking at digits on a screen today. We're talking about how we can actually engineer trust to better serve humanity. Let's get right into it.
So I want you to imagine something with me for a second. Imagine a paper bill in your pocket right now. It looks, feels, and spends exactly like every other piece of cash you've used your entire life. You wouldn't doubt if it's real, you certainly wouldn't worry it was spying on you, and you definitely wouldn't need to download a new app to use it. But this particular bill, it has a superpower. It's completely unique. And not just because of a printed serial number, but because of its actual physical essence. It literally has a fingerprint. You could not find a second identical bill anywhere on Earth. Now, this isn't some sci-fi movie plot. This is real, and it's called Puff Chip Currency.
All right, Section 1, Crossroads of Currency Systems. Why do we even need this? Well, our modern financial systems are kind of stuck right now at a really awkward crossroads.
Take a look at the trade-offs we're dealing with today. On one hand, you've got good old physical cash. It's great because it protects your privacy with complete anonymity, right? But that exact feature makes it impossible to trace crime, and it's pretty easy to counterfeit. Then there's cryptocurrency. It came in promising this decentralized utopia, but let's be real. It's largely morphed into a speculative, highly volatile asset that's constantly getting hacked. And finally, we have central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. Sure, they're incredibly efficient, but they bring up some major, very valid anxieties about state surveillance and losing our privacy. Up until now, it's felt like a zero-sum game, like we just had to choose between privacy and security. But what if we didn't have to compromise at all?
This brings us to Section 2, Physical Fingerprint Puff Technology. This is the breakthrough that literally gives us the best of all worlds without making those painful trade-offs. Let's look at the tech.
Okay, so PUF stands for Physical Unclonable Function. I know, it sounds super technical, but the core idea is actually wonderfully simple. Basically, whenever a microchip is manufactured, there are these tiny, unavoidable, completely random physical variations. PUF technology captures those microscopic differences to create a unique hardware fingerprint for that specific chip. And this isn't just theory. It's officially recognized by the international ISO standard 20897. This fingerprint is completely impossible to copy, forge, or hack. Why? Because the password isn't stored in some database waiting to be breached. The key is the actual physical structure of the chip itself.
When you stack this up against cryptocurrency, the difference is night and day. Crypto relies entirely on complex mathematics and market speculation. And here's the thing, math can eventually be broken, especially with quantum computers right around the corner. But physics? You absolutely cannot clone physics. You can't fake a random physical variation any more than you can fake my actual human fingerprint. Plus, PUF chip currency doesn't need huge mining rigs wasting massive amounts of electricity. And you don't have to worry about your private keys getting stolen. It just relies on physical hardware trust and seamlessly snaps right into our existing financial system. It really is just a smarter paper bill.
Now you're probably thinking, okay, but what about my privacy? That leads us to Section 3, Privacy and Controllable Anonymity. Let's break down exactly how this solves that whole surveillance anxiety we talked about earlier. So, the developers call this controllable anonymity, and here is how it plays out in real life. Step 1. Daily use. Let's say you're just buying a coffee. That transaction is completely silent and anonymous. No one knows who you are, just like handing over a crumpled $20 bill. Step 2. The actual transaction is just a quick encrypted handshake. The bank knows, okay, a valid transaction happened, but they have zero clue about your personal details. But here is Step 3. If and only if a transaction gets flagged for illegal activity, legally authorized bodies with a proper warrant can step in. They can use a threshold signature to decrypt that specific history. So in your everyday life, you are completely private. But if someone breaks the law, they can be traced. It totally protects the everyday citizen while taking away the criminal's hiding spots.
And honestly, perhaps the most elegant part of this whole system is that the PUF chip is a totally passive component. This is a massive deal. It does not actively broadcast a signal, it is not tracking your GPS location, it doesn't keep a diary of your spending habits, it stays completely silent until the exact fraction of a second a transaction actually occurs. So it completely removes that psychological fear of being monitored. Because at the end of the day, it's literally just a silent, secure piece of paper.
All right, moving on to Section 4, Painless Everyday Upgrade Experience. Because look, the best tech in the world is completely useless if people are too intimidated to use it. So how does this actually fit into our lives?
Think about how we've upgraded our money over the years. Going from cash to credit cards, that had a little learning curve. We had to figure out swiping and signing. Credit to mobile payments, we had to learn how to tap our phones. But going from our current setup to puff currency, the learning curve is literally zero. Why? Because the user experience is essentially going backward to the most natural thing in the world, just handing over a physical bill. No new apps to download, no passwords to memorize, zero digital wallets to manage. There's a design philosophy that fits this perfectly. The ultimate form of technology is making people forget it exists. Think about it. When you hand this to a cashier, no one is ever going to ask, "Hey, does that bill have a chip in it?" Because they just don't care. It just works, and it's infinitely safer. It's this incredibly painless upgrade because it doesn't force us to adapt to the machine, it adapts the machine to our human comfort.
So we have this perfectly secure, frictionless money. What now? That brings us to Section 5, Spiritual Currency and Global Vision. This is where we elevate from just physical mechanics to the actual, grander purpose of money itself, especially for international organizations.
We are not talking about burning down the old systems. It's a very pragmatic path forward. In the short term, central banks could just issue CBDCs that are tied to these physical PUF flares. Then, midterm, you could see international bodies like the IMF issuing PUF-backed special drawing rights to create a supplementary global currency. Ultimately, this builds toward a super-sovereign currency infrastructure, a system that is fair, transparent, and completely immune to being hijacked by speculative capital or any single nation. It's shared globally, and it's built on unbreakable trust.
And this is where the source material introduces a genuinely revolutionary concept: spiritual currency. Now, this isn't currency in the traditional sense of just ruthlessly chasing profits. While a lot of today's stablecoins just prop up traditional financial systems by tying their value to national debt, spiritual currency totally flips the script. It proposes a paradigm shift focused on distribution and human welfare. In this model, currency is issued based on ethically audited, verified social giving and substantive loss. Its actual value is anchored in moral integrity and contributing to society.
Now, you're probably asking, okay, but how does that actually work without people just scamming it? Well, the system uses some really robust anti-fooling mechanisms. For instance, it uses an emergency state identification matrix to direct aid based on helping the urgent without accidentally creating long-term welfare dependency. It even integrates hard life science data like the Activities of Daily Living Index to make sure real, verified human need is what triggers the support. It's literally proposing we shift our ultimate measure of global success away from just GDP and over to net national well-being. In this world, enterprises essentially act as giving central banks, turning more reinvestment into a verifiable standard.
Which brings us to our final thought today. The developers of this puff technology make it very clear. They are strictly a third-party tech provider. They aren't issuing the currency, they aren't playing regulator, and they absolutely do not hold your data. They're just providing a radically safer tool. They're letting issuers issue, regulators regulate, and everyday people just use their money with peace of mind. Because at the end of the day, the very essence of money is trust. And for the first time in human history, puff chip currency gives that trust a physical, unhackable foundation. So the question I want to leave you with is this. When trust is no longer a question mark, what incredible things can international organizations finally achieve for human welfare? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I'll catch you in the next one.